Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So have you ever wondered to venture into PvP, but you are a bit worried that your class or spec might be too difficult to play? Or do you simply want to pick up one for the easiest specs to play so that it will give you the best chance at pushing high rating in PvP? Well, in this video we are going to take a look at all of the viable specs in Shadowlands and ranking them in terms of easiness to play. As usual guys, to ask for your utmost favor, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more future contents, and remember to ring the bell. Let us begin. Basically, we are going to have 3 rankings for skill-based: easy, moderate, and hard. These rankings are based specifically for arena, but some of the reasoning for specific specs being placed may overlap into a battleground, duels, or just general world PvP. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. Just to give you a little more information on our tiers, the first is going to be easy mode. Inside of this, we are placing specs that are generally very easy to play. When it comes to arena, these specs have what it called a low skill cap. Simply put, a low skill basis is the minimum level of ability required to be effective with a certain spec. Then our moderate tier will include specs that have a little bit more skill depth to them. This could mean that you have got more utility to worry about, a harder rotation, or having a much harder time surviving. Finally, our last tier is hard. These specs have an extremely high skill cap in order to perform well at the highest level, requiring a certain amount of knowledge and skill in order to truly master it. Okay, we are going to be separating specs into range, melee, and healer just to give the most optimized rankings. So first thing first, for range, we've got our easy tier, in which is going to be Balanced Druid. Balance remains as one of the easiest range spec to play for a few reasons. First of all, they have one of the simplest rotations in the game, with a large portion of their damage all being from instant cast like Sunfire Moonfire and of course Star Search. Balance doesn't really have to worry about utility outside of the occasional dispel or off heal, and remain to be one of the tankiest casters, meaning your positioning or kiting doesn't really make or break how you perform. And of course, as with all specs, there is going to be some debate for how hard the spec is. But for balance, the hardest is attempting to pre-bear form for stuns and land cyclones, just a high instant damage and extremely durable caster, making them one of the easiest to pick up and perform well on, also being placed into that easy tier. Next, we've got Marksmanship Hunters. MM of course isn't your standard range spec, meaning that you don't have to deal with interrupts, which makes it obviously a lot easier. But with a simple and non-interruptible rotation, all of their CC being instant and paired with a lot of mobility in order to kite and build damage in distance. Obviously, there are some tools like paths to worry about, but other than that, securing an instant freezing trap and then unloading damage onto your kill target makes them extremely easy to pick up and perform well, especially now due to their continuous strength in Shadowlands by having some of the highest burst damage possible. So if you enjoy bursty range classes but hate dealing with interrupts, then Marksmanship is going to be your best of choice. The last addition being placed into our easy difficulty is going to be Destruction Warlock. Now if you got the experience of Battle for Azeroth, you will know why Destruction is going into our easy tier. Although Destruction is going to be a shadow of its former self in terms of general strength, the playstyle remains for the most part by having multiple schools of magic with Chaos Bolt, is still hitting hard. Combine multiple schools of magic with the fact that they are extremely strong due to their mastery and demon armor. Destro almost acts as a ranged turret. Find a good strategic location and cast Emulate, Chaos Bolts, or Fear. Moving on to our moderate difficulty tier, now we have our first edition of Affliction Warlock. Affliction is similar to Destro in terms of playstyle, and what makes it harder is its reliance on one school of magic in order to deal damage. If you got kicked on Shadow, then you are unable to deal any damage or use any defensives. This drawback can make it a lot harder for new players to pick up and jump into PvP. You could argue that a lot of affliction damage is instant. Well, it is true, but in order to deal any relevant damage and score the kills, you're going to have to cast and hit hard. Another very important factor is that Affliction lacks a lot of the tankiness part that Destro has due to their mastery, meaning to say that you are going to have to kite or run around and avoid a lot more damage in order to be successful. Next, under moderate difficulty, we have the newly reworked Shadow Priest. If you have played any version of Shadow, you might think that they are quite challenging, having to worry about team utility, dealing with interrupts, and having one of the most difficult rotations when it comes to PvP. Well folks, the reworks to Shadow have made their rotation extremely easy due to no longer to build up void form stacks and worry about consistent ramping up. Shadow now has multiple ways to instantly get their dots up in the form of two new talents, which are Darination and Unfurling Darkness, as well as void form playstyle to rely on the build up stacks of damage being removed. As we know, currently acts as a damage CD, making interrupts a lot easier to deal with. As with Balance and Destro, Shadow Priest is very tanky. You don't really have to worry about mobility or kiting in order to survive. What makes Shadow moderate difficulty is their utility and CC. You are going to have to master in order to perform well. But if you enjoy having an abundance of utility, high dots damage, and great CC, Shadow Priest is an amazing spec to be taken. Our final viable arena range spec plays into our moderate difficulty tier. We have got Elemental Shamans. Elemental is almost similar to Shadow in the way that you have got to pay attention to a lot of extra things. Elemental has a short CD interrupt as well as grounding totem, which means that if you want to perform well, you will have to be very vigilant about enemy cast. An important spell to be paired up with the fact that Elemental is hard to play. In general, Elemental's rotation is very simple, consisting of mostly instant, high burst damage abilities, which makes to decide ourselves when to burst. I would say Elemental isn't too hard to pick up initially, but to perform at a high level and against certain composition, it is moderately difficult. Alright then, that concludes our easy and moderate tiers. Now let us jump to hard mode. For this we have one class, and that's going to be Mage. Now you may think based on BFA, Fire Mage is simple and has a ton of viable compositions. Well, yeah, you are not entirely wrong. In BFA, Fire Mage wasn't exactly the hardest spec to play in a caster composition. With no CD greater Pyroblast and a ridiculous amount of haste. That being said, in Shadowlands, Mage has lost a lot of what made it easy to play. All Mage specs have a relatively simple rotation, but similar to Elemental, whereby to choose when to do your damage is the most important part. Mage compositions always rely heavily on CC, so securing crowd control as a mage is one of the hardest aspects, especially considering most of the time that you are playing with a melee, so you won't have another caster soaking up interrupts. And doing this well requires a lot of skill and awareness, especially at the higher levels of PvP. Cross-seasoning and bursting at the correct times are not the only reasons for mages being difficult. Another reason is that they are the class that relies the most on mobility in order to survive. So you have not only got to worry about interrupts when to burst securing CC, but also balancing your mobility with kiting and playing aggressively. All three mage specs require an extremely high skill cap in order to perform at the highest levels, and without a doubt is one of the hardest specs to pick up and perform well. But if you do master a mage, it can really pay off, as most of the strong comps for a few expansions have always included a well-played mage. With all the three mages specs going into our difficult tier, that concludes all of our range specs. Alright, moving on, let's talk about healers. Again, starting off with easy, in which our first addition is going to be Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin is generally considered the easiest healer to pick up and play. The reasoning behind this is that they have the most recovery mechanics and strong CDs paired up with powerful healing. The ability to buff their heals with Avenging Wrath makes them able to heal through any damage with ease. If target's HP drop low, they still provide Blessing of Sacrifice and Hand of Protection to completely recover from the heart-pounding fast situation. In terms of survivability, of course, having an immunity and short CD usable instants makes them one of the easiest healers to pick up and jump straightly into the arenas. Holy Paladin is very reactive. If a target drops low, you just use Sacrifice. If your HP drop low on yourself, then you can bubble, aka Divine Shield, and you don't really have to focus on doing something proactively. In Shadowlands, Holy Paladins deal with interrupts extremely well, thanks to the new addition of Concentration Aura making interrupt length 30 seconds shorter. In general, it's a very easy healing class to pick up and play. Once you have mastered rotating your defensives and avoiding CC, which oppose the only real challenges. Alrighty, next let us look into the healing moderate difficulty. We have Restoration Shamans. This pack currently has some of the strongest healing in the game, and with the majority of it coming from Earth Shield and Riptide, which makes their healing very simple. However, Restoration Shaman's pack brings a lot more utility as compared to other healers, being one of the only healers with an interrupt. It means that you will often have to pay more attention to important spell casts, to either look to use Windshear or Grounding Totem, while also managing offensive play like stopping via CC, purging, or even hexing. Restoration Shamans also have very limited recovery mechanics outside of Spirit Link Totem and requires you to be very proactive with your defensive CDs, looking to pre-Earth Shield, pre-Astral Shifts, and even making sure to swap a shield when needed. Not to mention, if Shaman healing does get to go down a little, Shamans are one of the healers that are required to hard cast abilities in order to heal through in pressure state, which we feel more than justify. They are moderate difficulty. Also being classed as moderately difficult, we have Disciplined Priest. Initially, people may think this is hard to pick up with a unique healing style and natural offensive playstyle. The reality is you don't need all that much of experience. The rotation is incredibly simple. You keep up the Atonement, you keep up the Purge of the Wicked, and then Shadowman if requires big amounts of healing or fast healing and Smite. But I think we can all agree that this has to be one of the highest skill healers, which having a ton of cool tricks that you can pull off. Furthermore, with Shadow Word Death being baseline and the addition of multiple defensive CDs into School of Magic to heal makes them not too hard to pick up and play, but mastering dealing damage, avoiding CC, and all of the other small micro plays making this under moderate difficulty. Our last addition to our moderate tier is going to be Mistweaver Monk. Mistweaver isn't the most complex healer by any means, having a relatively simple healing rotation and very high throughput, whereby their difficulty comes in a troublesome via ability to survive and avoid CC. As Mistweaver, this pack lacks any of the real defensive or recovery mechanics that other healers provide. In order to survive as a Mistweaver, you have to be very good in kiting, utilizing your rolls, transcendence, and the sum of other avoiding CC. If you got no cocoon, it's also very hard to recover in sticky situation, or if you fall behind, having to hard cast in order to heal targets up. Alright, moving on to our hardest tier, and the last healer left is of course Restoration Druid. Resto Druids are without a doubt the hardest healer to pick up and to master the ability to CC and deal damage. The ability to deal damage with cat form and feral affinity makes it a very perfect balancing act, deciding between when to do damage and when to heal. Other than the newly added nature swiftness, if you have to come out CC and help your teammates in low HP, then you have no way to quickly recover, which makes proactively using your CDs like Iron Bark and making you have HOTS on the correct target. The most extremely important for druids are also the only healer that has to manage a zero cooldown. High impact CC like Cyclone, Shadow Priest have mind control, but it is more often than not the druid are required to utilize Cyclone in order to prevent damage, securing kills, and just to generally control the game state. Druid are one of the hardest healers to pick up and hardest to master. So that leaves us with just the melees to cover, same as before. Let us start with the easiest packs to play with this one by surprise, and that is Demon Hunters. If you are looking for a melee with easy straightforward learn stuffs and jump into PvP, then there is no other pack like Demon Hunters, which is the easiest pack to play. They have a very simple rotation with high damage, the ability to burn mana with Mana Rift, combined with passive healing and short defensive CDs, resulting a class that is both easy to pick up and easy to master. Pairing up with a Demon Hunter for our easiest melees to play, we have Assassination Rogues. Assassination Rogues brings high lockdown, high single target damage, and almost an intrusive attack playstyle. Despite being a rogue which generally has a high skill cap attached to it, Assassination comes with an extremely low skill features, and for sure there is some potential for flashy plays like sapping and doing other rogue types of plays. But the bare basic Assassination is incredibly simple, and it is rightfully one of the easiest melee packs to pick up. So if you like a simple rotation and generally an ease of play, but still like to have the potential to make flashy plays, Assassination is a fantastic choice. Lastly, and making the cut for easiest melee, we have Frost Death Knight. Frost brings high burst, decent damage, and above average tools in order to survive. Despite now gaining a few new abilities, the complexity as compared to Unholy just isn't there for Frost. Moving next to our moderate difficulty melee in 3 specs are Enhancement, Shaman, Retribution Paladins, and Feral Druids. All 3 of these packs come with, again for the most part, is simple rotations focusing mainly around high burst damage. The complexity of their kits comes with their utility, and in the case of rats, they have of course got their blessings. Enhancement has grounding, purge, and shear, while feral druids has their cyclones and affinities. Next pack to join this moderate difficulty melee got Arms Warrior. Arms Warrior have so many tools which a player can utilize, whereby separating a good warrior from a bad one. Things like Disarm, War Banner, Spell Reflect, Intervene. All of these tools required a certain amount of overview and foresight of how the game is going. You can't just straightly pump damage into a target to be successful. This is why Arms is a moderate level of difficulty. Unholy Decay also comes with a moderate difficulty while sharing a lot of the same tools as its Frost Decay counterpart. Unholy has a lot more tools at its disposal, ordered up with a far more complex damage. Rotation relying a lot more onto micro CC and passive damage in order to create damage and secure kills. Also going into our stack moderate difficulty melee section, we've got Windwalkers. Windwalkers are relatively simple spec to play. Just pick up the class and do well when it comes to damage, but what makes them harder to perform well is on surviving and enabling your team. Unlike a lot of other melee, they rely heavily on their mobility and kiting in order to survive. especially using defensive CDs or mobility CDs like enabling their team tools like Ride the Wind, Tiger's Lust, and Ring of Peace can be an incredible utility tools if used in a right time. Last but not least, we've got Survival Hunters. Survival is a very different type of melee, and it's almost a melee range hybrid with a large portion of your overall damage being from range. This is where survival gets tricky. It is all about learning when to go into melee range and to combine with instant CC tools like Tracker's Nets, Mending Bandage, High Explosive Trap, and Roar of Sacrifice. That gave survival the extra depth and gives it a very unique playstyle in which you have to know your limits and can be quite an overwhelming spec to play. Alright, now we are jumping up to our hardest melees, as the hardest spec right now to pick up and play is going to be Subtlety Rogue. Well, they may seem easier to pick up on beta right now. This is largely due to just how strong they are, but trust me when we say that Sub Rogue is not an easy class to pick up and perform well on a high skill level. The whole playstyle revolves around stun locks, burst damage, and CC. Not only you need to know and master your burst rotation factoring in things like relentless and arc ratio, but you also require to control the pace of the game on utilizing your high CC to stun multiple targets at once. Alright, that concludes our easiest to most difficult melee specs to play. I hope you enjoyed our long discussion on the easiest melee, range, and healers to play to the hardest one for PvP, primarily focused on arena. Again folks, as a disclaimer, the video content here now is based on beta testing, tuning and rework still underway. Hopefully we can get a very solid result before the release of Shadowlands. As usual folks, to end my story, it's just my personal overview which may be right or wrong. If you have any ideas, concern, opinion, anything to add up, feel free to drop under the comments box down below to discuss. Appreciate for your full support. Thank you everyone for watching, and see you again in the next video. Take care, stay safe, and have a pleasant day.